Jesus would often say, "Let not your hearts be troubled. Have faith in God and faith in me. Be not afraid."
I had this weight on me of these things that I did as a young man. You will be forgiven. You are my son. You are going to be free of this. There's nothing is too big for God, brothers.
Brothers, most of you know Mark. Mark and I have been friends for a couple of decades now. Back when he started the Kingsmen, an incredible effort. And Mark, it's been a blessing not only to Philadelphia, but nationally. You've done just an unbelievable job. And for those who may not know you, let's talk a little bit about where you grew up. Let's talk about how you met your wife. I know your conversion story, but I think there's about 1,000 here who don't. So before we get into the FBI, and Jim, Mark knows how you feel. They broke his door down. But let's talk a little bit about that, how you grew up and how you met your wife and how many children you have now, Mark.
Sure. So I'm from Bucks County. I grew up in Jamison, PA, Warwick Township. There we go. I went to LaSalle High School. I was a has-been athlete. Went to Catholic University in Washington, D.C., played some football. I got a couple sniffs with the NFL, New England Patriots. It didn't amount to anything, but I pursued that before I pursued God, really. And I'll just sum it up by saying that once I figured out, like Jim, that my life was about understanding my identity as a beloved son, and that Jesus was my best friend, that I started giving my life over to him. And I worked in juvenile corrections, actually. And then I decided that I'd volunteer and work with young adults and teens. And I recognized that I wasn't walking the walk. I was talking the talk. I wasn't hustling, but I was talking the talk. But I needed to start living it. And it was really in the area of unchastity in my life that I was really convicted. And sins of the flesh, kind of St. Augustine kind of style, not like any child out of wedlock, but certainly ignoring God's commands as that goes. But then I started to get the pro-life message, and I started volunteering with the pro-life movement, and that was 20 years ago. And then I joined a group called Generation Life after getting a master's degree in education, and I just decided to become a full-time evangelist in 2003.
We know, Mark, I think that's where we may have met. Shout out to Gen Life. 20 years ago, I actually got a request from Gen Life. Would I come and speak to them? And this is when down on City Line Avenue, and they had college students from pretty much all over the country. And I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? And they said, well, like a businessman's perspective on pro-life. And I said, okay, I think I can do that. I think I can do that. And I love music, as everybody here knows, and so I brought some music with me to play as I was coming on. And it was Circle of Life from The Lion King. And I got there a couple hours early because I wanted to see what was going on. And I walked into this one room, and this beautiful young lady was talking about being conceived in rape. And so that stuck with me for the next hour and a half. I get up on the stage, Gen Life, and I said, I was asked to come and talk about a businessman's perspective on pro-life. At least that's what I was told. Now I know why I was really told to come here, because in my head, and I never discussed this with anybody, Mark, but in my head I was like, you know what? I'm 100% pro-life. Maybe I'm 98% pro-life, because if somebody's raped, how could you say that's God's child? If a child was born in incest, I don't know. I mean, this is all going in my head. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, I'm not so sure that in that case I wouldn't maybe give them a pass. Well, that's why God had me there 20 years ago. It had nothing to do with business. I got up on the stage with a very short speech. I said, and I believe her name was Andrea. I said, Andrea, are you still here? And she's in the back. And I said, if you are, please raise your hand. And she raised her hand. I said, Andrea, is your mother here? And if she's here, would she raise her hand? I don't even know what prompted me. Her mother is sitting next to her. They both stood up. And I said, thank you, because there's hundreds of people here today. Now I know why I'm here. I will never, ever, ever, ever again question the will of God on the birth of a child.
Amen.
Never again. So tell us about you and Gen Life.
Right, so I hadn't met my wife at that point. You asked the question, I just was busying myself about the work of God, and I said, you know what, I've been on more blind dates than I care to remember, and I just said, I'm gonna retire that. I'm gonna give up dating, and I'm gonna let God just bring that Eve to me. So I was traveling around the country, the lower 48, and we're sharing the message of life and love, and saving all intimate acts for marriage. Believe it or not, a lot of Catholics don't even get that, but we think we can do everything but, like somehow we're still Catholic in that way, right? Our Catholic education probably taught us that. But, you start integrating your life, you start seeing these things, you recognize that, as Jim did, it's the little things and the fundamentals, and it's the kindnesses, and the love is patient, love is kind. And so I just was volunteering my time, and I met my wife at a pro-life prayer vigil in 2007. And on January 27th, we were engaged about 2 months later. And a year later, we get married. And then 13 kids later, here I am.
Give them some love. Give them some love. 13. That's like the Catholics of the old days.
Yeah, six in heaven, 7 still on pilgrimage with us. So that's where that 13 comes
That a
from.
babe. 6 in heaven, 7 still on pilgrimage.
That's right.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
So Mark, I think Mark was one of our early speakers. I'm going back about 12, 13 years ago, Mark.
Sure.
And I think it was at Ryan. It might have been at Ryan where you spoke.
Yeah, Archbishop Ryan. Sure.
Yeah. So then bring us up to date. So since then, Mark, you started the King's Men when? What year was that?
Yeah, 2004.
So 2004 started the King's Men, got married in 2007. The King's Men is still thriving. And tell just a little bit about the King's Men for those of you.
Yeah, it's a men's ministry. We're all over the country just through guys finding us online and wanting to do small men's groups. We know the Emmaus guys. We do retreats like that, similar, not quite the same, but outdoor experiential retreats to funnel guys into our pipeline, which are small men's groups, men meeting on a weekly basis. A lot of guys in this room have been a part of that. And that just happens organic. We had a group in Kabul, Afghanistan. We're a military base. We have a group in South Korea right now, group in Switzerland, group in Poland. So, just organically.
So, Mark, bring us up to date.
Sure.
What happened?
All right, so October 13th, the day the sun dances, my son and I are down at Planned Parenthood. Some of you guys have seen this story. And this is a great day for me and my son. We go down. He's part of the Philadelphia Boys Choir. It's an Emmy Award-winning choir, Grammy-nominated choir. And he's the president. He just got elected the president. But anyhow, we go down there because he's got choir at 4 p.m. And we drive 2 hours from Kittnersville, Bucks County, down to the neighborhood in Philadelphia. And we're at our post. My son's done about 40 or 50 prayer vigils with me there. I've been going to this place for 20 years. And on this day, an escort at the facility starts harassing my boy. Now, I've known this guy for years, and he's talked to my boy before. But on this day, he was...
You knew the guy who was harassing your son?
Sure,
Okay.
I did. His name's Bruce. Pray for Bruce. Divorced guy. He's a wounded guy. But anyhow, he starts harassing my son in a very intentional way. Now, this is, it's way before the Dobbs case, and nothing like that has happened. But nonetheless, I'm an agitator down there. They don't like me because I help women choose life. And so they try to get in the way of that. But nonetheless, we have rights. They have rights. On this day, he just was badgering my son. And I did what every man in this room would do. In fact, my wife said, you did exactly what I want you to do. You take my son into the city of Philadelphia, you better protect my son. It may not be as bad as Boston, but it's pretty bad. But so when I had this man continually badgering my son, I said, you got to stop, brother. You got to stop. And you have permission to talk to my son. I walked him back. And he coming back at my son again. I pushed the guy. Now, in the city of Philadelphia, that's not a big deal, right? The DA, Larry Krasner, he wasn't interested in it.
Yep.
The Philadelphia Police Department, they weren't interested in it because it happens every weekend at the Eagles game, right? So no one prosecuted, but the guy put me in a private criminal complaint, and we went through the process, municipal court, state court, Philadelphia, and it got dismissed. It was a local problem handled on a local level. dismissed on April 22nd, 2022. 5 days later, I get a target letter. The DOJ was watching this case, okay? Now, Dobbs has not leaked yet. That's going to happen in May. April 27th, 5 days later, I'm on the same sidewalk with my son, and a plainclothes guy looking much like Eustace is right now with a tie walks right up to me and says, "Are you Mark Houck?" And I said, "Who wants to know?" Because I don't answer that question anymore. And he served me, and he said, "There you go." And I looked at it. It was a target letter. You're a target of a federal grand jury investigation for 2 violations against the FACE Act. Have your attorney contact us right away. My federal prosecutor, former federal prosecutor, Matt Heffron at the Thomas More Society, calls up the AUSA, the Assistant U.S. Attorney, and says, "You have no case. My client's innocent. But should you want to indict him, no need to bring an agent out to his house. He's a peaceful guy. We'll bring him to you. Just give us a call." This is April 27th. And he said, of 2022.
Last April.
Right. And he said, "Oh, and by the way, if you want to pick him up, he's on the street every Wednesday. So no need to bother him." About 5 months goes by. I get a call from Matt in August 2022, and he says, "Have you heard from the AUSA?" I said, "No. Why would I have heard from him?" He said, "Well, she won't return my calls." Now, Dobbs has happened. Roe v. Wade's overturned. President Biden was in Philadelphia. He said he's going to defend abortion rights at Independence Hall to the utmost of his ability, and people are starting to get arrested. Mar-a-Lago happens, and we see all this. But I'm not thinking I'm going to be raided because they're not even doing anything with it. So I said, "Well, let's just let sleeping dogs lie, Matt." He said, "Yeah." September 23rd, Friday morning at 6:30 in the morning. I'm up early. It's dark o'clock. It's a co-op day. It's a homeschool. We're a homeschool family because, we want to preserve that innocence of our kids and the faith. And
Amen.
It's dark. And it's dark. So it's a great day for us. I'm up early. I got a quiche in the oven because real men eat quiche. And
We have proof now, boys.
we do. And I'm excited because we're getting out of the house because, co-op kids, it's a co-op day and homeschool kids don't get out of the house. And I get to get out of the house. So it's nice. I hear a heavy banging at the door at 6:45 in the morning. And then the doorbell lights up the whole house. And I got 7 kids, 7 babies sleeping. And my wife's stirring. And they say, "Open up." I don't know who it is. Now, I'm rural Bucks County. It's deer country. If someone comes to your door and bangs on the door and says, "Open up," you're going to the door with your shotgun or some sort of Second Amendment device, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So my neighbor's got an armory. Yeah. Now,
That's why we have the Second Amendment.
that's right. So I don't own any guns. I'd love to own a gun, but I don't own any guns. I got airsoft guns. So I go to the door and I say, "Who is it?" Now, Director Ray's going to say to Brett Barr on Fox this week, it was our process. Merrick Garland's going to say, "We followed our protocol." It's not protocol to bang on a door and not announce yourself. So I said, "Well, who is it?" And they said, "It's the FBI. Open up." They bang again. Now, they're all fired up. It's a high-risk arrest for them, I guess, because I don't know what's going on. I'm thinking someone hit a deer, a tree fell on a line. I don't even know what's going on. I open up the door, and I see 15 marked and unmarked units. I see
Literally 15 outside your door.
they're all in my driveway. They're surrounding my home, okay? And my wife is witnessing this upstairs. And I come out the door, and I say, "What are you doing here?" I got 5 agents on my porch with M16 guns pointed at me. Heavily armored vests. They got the word SWAT under the vest.
Unholstered, pointing at you.
Oh, all unholstered. And all the state troopers that were there, and there was at least 10 of those, and there was 20-plus agents and state troopers. They're all behind their doors with guns and pistols pointed at me. Ballistic shields, ballistic helmets, 2 battering rams. And I'm thinking, my gosh, if I didn't open up the door, they were coming right in. And so I said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "Well, you know why we're here." Again, I think that's protocol. When you're an FBI agent, you come and you lead with the warrant. We're here for your arrest, and here's the warrant. It's usually attached to the end of the gun. But they said, "Well, you know why we're here." So my wife comes roaring down in her leopard robe, and she says, "It's true.
God bless the woman.
Yeah, lioness, man." And I'm just like in shock. I actually said to them before she came down, I said, "You wouldn't be here if the Trump administration was in the White House." I actually said that.
Well, it's true. When you look at...
There's only one guy not clapping. He's over there.
Right. Well, Garland was not part of that administration, I don't believe.
Yeah.
Right, Garland.
So Right. He was not. He was Obama's appointee for justice, and he never got that. Right. He got blocked in the Congress. In this, they filibustered him. Right. So anyhow, my wife comes down. She says, "You got a warrant for his arrest?" And he says, "We're taking him with or without a warrant." Wow. Again, that's protocol with the FBI. So Merrick Garland's going to split hairs and say, well, I don't agree with the characterization. Ryan Marie might have said after the incident, she's talking to all the reporters, there was 30 agents and troopers there, and it probably was more like 25. So now he can say before the Oversight Committee that I don't agree with that and get away with his lies. But nonetheless, I said, "Can I brush my teeth?" And he said, "No, can I put some deodorant on?" Because I recognize I got to get out of here because I got kids that are freaking out and screaming, and they're downrange right now, and the guns are in the house, and they're pointing at them, and they're at the back of my house, and I have a really anxious little girl named Therese who's walking around pacing with her fingers in her mouth. And
So Mark, by
yeah.
this time all the kids are up and they can see the agents and the guns.
Oh, they're all awake, and they're screaming.
Yeah.
And I said, what do you want me to do? Can I put some clothes on? No. I put some socks on? No. I got flip-flops, pair of shorts, no underwear, and a T-shirt. I said, "Can I put some underwear on?" No.
Wow.
I'm like, all right.
Wow.
Can I take my rosary? Yes. Let me take my rosary. Jeez. So I'm in the black SUV. I'm cuffed in front of my children. I can't say goodbye to my kids. And then my youngest boy yells, "Please don't take him. He's my best friend."
Oh. How old is he, Mark?
He was 6 at the time.
Yeah.
So fast forward, I'll take you down to the federal building. I'm giving the guys directions.
Before we get to the building,
Yeah.
one favor. So your son says, "Don't take him. He's my best friend."
Yeah.
What's going on in your head right then?
I'm filled with a peace and a surrender, knowing that I didn't do anything wrong, and that they're in God's hands, and I just surrendered them to God.
So you had that peace.
I had full peace. Came
Wow.
out that if the Prince of Peace didn't come out of we've enthroned our home to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. I highly recommend everybody here and do that. And the Sacred Heart of Jesus came out upon and kept cooler heads because it was reckless. It was an act of terror, and I'm sure if it wasn't the Prince of Peace, someone would have gotten shot that day.
No question. When you have 15 armed men with the guns,
Full adrenaline.
full,
ready to go.
even if you're a good soul, full adrenaline is a tough one. Tell us how do you do that? How do your house to the Sacred Heart of Jesus? How do you do that? So
Yeah,
we
you
all
can
know.
enthrone your house to the Sacred Heart of Jesus. You get an image of the Sacred Heart, and you invite the people who are in the Philadelphia area who handle that home enthronement. And wherever you go, even you don't have to do it at every house you get moved to. You just take the picture. You
Right.
take the Sacred Heart of Jesus. And so again, that's in our home, and we've had Mass said in our home, as many of the guys here have had, and Eucharist and holy water in our home. And so, Jesus came out. So we drove down to the federal building, and I said, why so many guys? And they said, "Well, sir, we know nothing about you."
Were
I
they
said,
talking to you on the way down in the SUV?
Yeah, and they're recording it all. And I said, "Why so many guys?" And he said, "Well, sir, we know nothing about you." I said, "I find it hard to believe that the FBI doesn't know anything about me." So I said, "No worries, let's talk about homeschooling." So the guy driver wants to talk about homeschooling. We get down to the federal building, and I'm giving him directions. Don't go that way, go this way. He says to me, when we get down there, fingerprint me, he says, "Hey, I got to go, but it was a real pleasure meeting you." I said, "Great, let's do it again next week." I'm like, "All right, man, it was a joy for me." Now, this is what's interesting. They cuff me, just like Jim, right? I'm already cuffed after that, and then they belly shackle me. Now, I'm innocent till proven guilty, right? Because I'm charged, but I'm not guilty. So I'm belly shackled, and I'm shackled in my ankles.
After you got out of the car, or before you got in?
No, this is right after they fingerprinted me. I'm in their custody. I'm in their federal building. Now, they were going to release me on my own recognizance, which tells you that I wasn't a flight risk or a threat to the community. But they're going to shackle me. So they bring me to this white room, and this will be really what I think you want to hear is they bring me to a white room, 6 by maybe 8, white table, ring on the table. They chain me to the table, and I'm still shackled in my belly and waist. For 6 hours, it was the closest I've ever felt to Christ in my life. I was the foot of Mount Calvary. I could pluck a splinter off the cross. I had prayed without ceasing. It was the first time that my will was completely united with God's will. And I had great joy.
So even then, you had the peace. You're shackled to the ring. You're there for 6 hours in the weight room, and you had the peace then. There was no anxiousness, anxiety, panic, fear that, you know.
Very little, very little. I mean, you come in and out of those thoughts, but I was praying my rosary and
Attaboy.
every devotion. I was thinking of all the saints that were ever imprisoned, and there's a lot of them. And so there was a lot of prayer time there.
Yeah.
But you know, we were transferred to U.S. Marshals, which is the basement after I was on the 6th floor. And you think like, oh, let's take his shackles off his ankles, right? Because he's going home. No, they kept the shackles on me, and they kept the belly shackle on me and the cuffs, and I'm inching like Jim was, you know. I'm like, is this really necessary? And I said, do you have a cross to the case agent? And he says, I don't have a heavy cross for you. I said, well, I can tell you it's coming. I never was dehumanized like I was dehumanized at the U.S. Marshals. They treat you like a felon. It's prison transfer. Jim probably knows. They just treat me like an animal. And I'm like, wow, man, this is the persecution, right? This is being Catholic, being pro-life. This is what you get. So we have arraignment 5 days later, and we go before Pilate. And I'll just share this to sum it up, because I know we want these guys to get some lunch. But I knew the journey from arraignment, which is station 1, going before Pilate, would be the journey of the way of the cross for me. And I journaled through all that, but I knew we would travel the way of the cross all the way to crucifixion date, which was January 24th, about a month ago, when the trial began. And we journeyed, and it was a beautiful, most profound experience of my life. Certainly burdensome in some ways, but joy was flooding. Remember, the whole world is praying for us at this point.
Yeah, by now, this is it's on national news. It was everywhere. Mark.
My wife was on Tucker Carlson, and she wants to crawl under rocks for a living, right? That's what she feels comfortable
like
doing.
Susie,
and they put her on Tucker Carlson. So she did great. She quit. I can't speak. They're not going to let me speak because I could jeopardize my case, right? So I'm bridled, and I'm just watching all this, and just, you know, a lamb to the slaughter. And so we begin that journey, and Mother Teresa's nuns put our picture over Mother's crypt in Calcutta. They're praying over that. Uganda sends us a message, we're praying for you. So you feel the love of the world and the generosity of the world, and we're traveling the way of the cross.
You see how Jesus works.
I mean, through his people, through the hands and the feet, which are his people. And we felt that love. But it wasn't without its stress at times, but we still had a abounding joy and peace. And I want to just share this just to bring you to the trial real quick. So I knew that the trial would be station 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. 10 is the stripping of his garments. I was going to be stripped, ecce homo. I was going to be naked before the world. And I just said, you got to receive it. Just receive that. And I knew in my heart that I would be put in prison. I knew that I was going to be put in prison. And I said, it would be for the best. That no matter what happens, that if I go to prison, God has a great plan, and it's going to be for the best. Because I knew that I didn't do anything wrong. And I said to my attorneys right before their trial, I said, are they going to come in with a plea? And they said, no, Mark, that's got to come from you. I said, well, I'm not going to ask for a plea. And they said, well, they're not going to offer, because they got a 98% conviction rate as a federal government when they prosecute you. They're not going to come in with a plea. Well, don't you know it? They come with the plea on January 6th of all dates. January 6th.
Wow.
And
wow.
The plea is, because I was facing 11 years.
For those of you who don't know, something happened in Congress that day a couple of years ago. Yeah.
I was facing 11 years in federal prison, 3 years supervised probation, and $350,000 in fines. They said 0 to 6 months, no fine, and no probation. Plead guilty to 1 count. And I said, well, I'm not taking that. I said, let me talk to my wife. So I go to the lioness and I say, what do you think? And she says,
smart move.
You're not going to take that plea.
Wow.
Because you're innocent.
Wow.
And 2, if you take that plea, don't bother coming home to this house.
Wow.
She actually said
so
that.
you're going to go to prison no matter what. You might as well take the least path.
She said, it's a cowardly deal, and we got to risk this for the pro-life movement.
Wow.
Because we need a case law. So
Behind
United
every
States
great
versus
man,
Houck.
there's a better woman.
So the case is deadlocked on the end of the trial. My son acquitted himself really well. He defended me. I got on the stand. We prayed for a spirit of confusion. It happened. And they go to jury, and the jury's deadlocked on Friday, January 27th, the day I met my wife, 16 years prior. Out of
Deadlocked.
privilege. Deadlocked. 12 jurors of my peers, a jury of my peers, and the judge says, go home for the weekend. Boom, dead, in the tomb, 3 days, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Wow.
Come back on Monday. Come back on Monday. This never happens in a federal trial. The jury passes notes to the judge in the morning, and they say, we got a problem. And the judge starts to interview each juror in his chambers. Never happens. Apparently, there was a juror on
I'm
Friday.
sorry, Mark, just so we know, because this does never happen. Did you say the judge interviewed them each one by one?
That's right, because they
By
passed
themselves.
notes to the judge, Judge Gerald Papert, Notre Dame guy, Villanova grad.
All right.
All right.
Woo!
He was great.
God has his ways.
Yeah, so they all were being interviewed because they said, we got a problem. A jury's not deliberating. One juror came in, and Friday he said, the guy's guilty, I'm not deliberating. He said that on Friday. And the rest of them were like, come on, man, you got to enter into this process. So they shared this with the jury, and the prosecution has to witness all this. The government, they say, yeah, you got to get rid of this guy. He's not entering in. So they had to dismiss this guy. We had to call the alternate. By the way, if you ever get to serve on a jury, just try to get on that jury, right? A lot of Catholics get on there like, oh, just say yes. You can be fair and unbiased. Get on juries, man. We need you on juries. So, and just don't try to get out of it. People like me are counting on you, right? Most of us want to get out of it. But anyhow, they dismiss him. They call the guy from Lancaster. He drives in at 3 p.m., the hour of divine mercy. After less than an hour of deliberation, they got a unanimous verdict. Now, we don't know what it is. So then, of course, the judge brings them in. It's the only time I was nervous during the trial. I had so much peace. Rosaries galore. They had an overflow room for all the support. They come out. Jury, have you found do you have a verdict? Yes, Your Honor, we do. What do you find? We, the jury, first count, 2 counts now. I got 2 counts. In my heart, I thought I was going to be convicted of the second count. We, the jury, find the defendant on the first count not guilty. Now, I thought, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. The 3 elements of the first count.
Tell us what the first count was.
Yeah,
again.
well, they're both a violation of the federal access to clinic or freedom of access to clinic entrances, which I wasn't blocking anyone from getting at. The guy was harassing my son. That was it. But they applied it, and the judge said to the prosecution, "Go back to D.C. and fix this because this is being spread way too thin, and it's infringing upon the liberty of of everyday citizens." So I knew that 3 element of that would be that, yeah, I have to be intentionally stopping a quote unquote reproductive health care worker. Now I pushed an escort who is nowhere near a woman who was seeking an abortion, right? And I was defending my son. Second count is a simple assault. Same elements, but with a simple assault. I got a video. I pushed the guy down. Can't refute that. You push the guy. It is assault, right? Simple assault. Now, it's justified. I'm innocent. I'd do it again tomorrow. But I thought for sure I was going to prison. But God had other plans. And sure enough, count 2, Mr. Mark Houck, you are free to go, the judge said after that verdict, which was the best words of the day.
Oh,
And
you are free to go. Free at last.
Yeah, and I said to the judge, Judge Papert, I said, "Thank you, Judge." He says, "No, thank you, Mr. Houck."
Did he really?
He did, yeah.
Did he say that in the courtroom?
He did. He did.
Wow.
Yeah.
Give it up for the judge. Give it up for the judge.
We went way too long.
Oh, Mark. No, that's so great.
Yeah.
So, Mark, first of all, I don't even know how to say thank you. I mean, not for man up, but for manning up and being such a great example to all of us. And to your beautiful wife, the lioness, for sticking in the corner by her pride and saying, "Mark, you didn't do anything wrong. You got to stand up." So I'll leave us with this one note as we leave. Wow, our 15th year, unbelievable morning. And Mark, you remember this because this isn't your time and my time, but Cardinal George from Chicago, just a very holy man, super guy, now deceased. He was on our board at the Papal Foundation, just a super guy. You know, I was much younger back then. And but he said something so profound, I'll never forget it. He said to all of us, he said that my successor will be persecuted. His successor as cardinal or archbishop will be martyred. Thank you, brother, for going willfully to martyrdom and coming back by the grace of God. Give it up for Mark. God
Thanks,
bless
brother.
you, brother. Philly's own. Philly's own.
Testifying before Congress on March 24th. Keep us in prayer.